the feeling on the continent was to establish sovereignty. There was no question of that. No question that at the same time, the old imperial masters had not renounced their habits of colonialism. Because just 2 years before the OAS was established in 1963, the old colonial masters executed Patrice Lumumba. And of course, that execution was not either the first execution to compromise the sovereignty of people on the African continent, nor was it the last. And indeed, those executions continue into the present. Those habits of colonialism, comrades, those habits of colonialism are important to understand. I want to take you briefly on a trip to the Sahel region of Africa, which gets reported very minimally. I've been doing a series, particularly on Mali. You know, it's interesting. The Europeans right now are in a flap about the question of NATO. The Europeans are in a flap about the war in Ukraine. They're in a serious flap. They are confounded by what's happening. They are distressed by war. And yet, it is normal for them to expand their activities deep into the sovereign territory of Africa. The sovereignty of Ukraine may be compromised. That has them in a flap. But nobody in those same European circles was in a flap when NATO decided to go beyond the UN Security Council Resolution 1973 and destroy Libya. A destruction, the destruction of that country, which resulted in serious destabilization of the Sahelian states, Mali, Niger, even southern Algeria, Mauritania, and so on. When the French invaded Mali through Operation Barkhane in 2013, nobody was in a flap. In fact, they said the French are part of the war on terror. When the French military has routinely killed civilians in Mali, and I've talked to people who have been survivors of those attacks, where the French military has denied war crimes. In fact, if we go back to the war against Libya, NATO's legal counsel, Peter Olsen, when asked to share targeting information, NATO's bombing runs, in order for an investigation of what had happened in Libya, Peter Olsen said, NATO never commits war crimes. NATO never commits war crimes. It is in fact impossible for NATO to commit war crimes. So, the French never commit war crimes. What they've done in Mali is beyond reproach. Ask the Malian people that. Ask the Malian people that. For the last several years, the Malian people have wanted the French military out. There have been 2 military coups in Mali in 2020 and 2021. Just this month in May, the Malian military junta asked the French to leave, and they have now themselves left the French cut-out political project called G5 Sahel. Why am I telling you all this? I would like to also tell you, by the way, about Mozambique, where the French were not happy to intervene directly in Cabo Delgado province, you know, to defend their investments, French Total's investments in natural gas fields off the coast of Mozambique, northern Mozambique. No, so they cut a deal with the Rwandan army on behalf of the French to invade Mozambique, in fact, with the permission of the government in Maputo. I'm saying all this because the concept of sovereignty was at the heart of the founding of the OAS in 1963. Africa Day is about establishing the sovereignty of the continent. And yet routinely, I'm not talking now about the 1960s and 70s and 80s, I'm talking about now. Now, it's the French that invade, and nobody calls that an invasion. It's the French that invade. In fact, I would like to say to you that the Europeans and the US have moved Europe's border effectively from north of the Mediterranean to south of the Sahara. They've essentially taken and garrisoned the Sahel region. You know, they always get upset and say the Chinese are colonizing Africa. We hear this all the time. Chinese are colonizing Africa. Philip Dexter, our comrade, said that China has a military base in Africa. In fact, I've been there. It's in Djibouti. It's not a military base, in fact. It's a naval station that the Chinese established in order to join a United Nations operation against piracy. Now, I have my own mixed feelings about that UN operation against piracy because they're attacking poor people of the coast of Somalia whose fishing was destroyed by multinational corporations and they took up piracy. Let's solve the economic problems. Don't treat this as a security issue. So easy to treat everything as a security issue. Underneath that is a basic economic problem. That's hardly a military base. Meanwhile, in Agadez, Niger, the United States has a massive drone base. It's the largest drone base in the world. The Research Institute of the Socialist Movement of Ghana and Tricontinental produced a dossier on the militarization of Africa. The militarization of Africa by whom? By the United States and the French. The African Union, which is heir to Africa Day and the founding of the OAS in 1963, the African Union in 2016, the Peace and Security Council of the African Union passed a resolution which said that the Peace and Security Council of the African Union passed a resolution which said that foreign military bases should be removed from the African continent. Why can't that be established? If it's the African Union's Regional Security Council, why can't its opinion, sovereign opinion of all the countries on the African continent, why can't that be established? Why can't the sovereignty of the continent be established? This is a fight to exercise sovereignty. Why have we abandoned thinking in those terms? Because sovereignty is on the one side about territory, but it's also about the economy. Why can't African countries and Africa as a regional project establish an agenda? Why isn't it allowed, the countries and then the project alone, to establish their own sovereign agenda, to trade with whomever they want, to get investment from wherever they want, to establish the right to price their resources however they want? Why is that not at the top of the agenda? Instead, we allow the old imperialists with their old colonial habits to dominate the sovereignty of this continent. We allow it. We're not even ashamed of it. We are not even angry about it. We allow it. We allow them to win the information war and to say they're here for the war on terror. They're here to deal with Al-Qaeda. They're here to deal with Al-Shabaab. They're here to deal with Boko Haram. When in fact we know why they are here. They are here to deal with the coltan. They are here to deal with the uranium. They are here to deal with the natural gas. They are here to deal with the money. That's why they're here. And yet their information war, their powerful means of entering our brains, not only through their news establishments, but through their cultural production, through their films and so on, through their Netflix series that we all watch. They enter our heads. They enter our heads. And here's where I want to end. One of the core elements of the anti-colonial movement, one of the core elements of the anti-colonial movement was for us in the third world to establish our own understanding of ourselves. To establish our own understanding of ourselves. When I was in college, my greatest hero was a man, a tall man from the African continent, and that was Thomas Sankara. Sankara was my greatest hero in college. And do you know why Sankara was my hero? I didn't know what he was doing in his country. It was hardly covered in our press. But when I was a young person, I read one thing. I read that there was a man called Thomas Sankara who could play the electric guitar very well and had become the leader of his country, which had a ridiculous name. His country's name was ridiculous. It was Upper Volta. Who lives in a country called Upper Volta? And by the way, we're speaking from South Africa. What kind of name? No other country is named in the cardinal points of a continent. You know, East Asia, West Asia, those are regions, not names of countries. But Upper Volta, above the Volta River, those are classic colonial names. Thomas Sankara comes to power in Upper Volta. And he says, I don't want to live in a country with this ridiculous name. Because we must stand upright. We must think for ourselves. We must develop our own agenda. We must establish sovereignty. So Thomas Sankara said, we're not going to live in Upper Volta anymore. We're going to live in Burkina Faso. We're going to live in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, we're going to live in a country called the land of upright people. The land of upright people. We're not going to hunch our shoulders in front of colonialism. We're not going to giggle when colonialism speaks. We're not going to be embarrassed and shy in front of them. We're not going to accept what they say. We're not going to rush off and change our Facebook profile to the Ukrainian flag when none of them ever changed their social media profiles to the Iraqi flag or the Yemeni flag or the Palestinian flag or the Congolese flag. They don't even know what those flags look like. We are upright people. We live in the land of upright people. Thomas Sankara, one of the great African leaders, said, stand upright. And of course they killed him. But we are looking forward to the time, comrades, when there's not one Thomas Sankara on this continent, but there are 100 million of you who walk in the name of Thomas Sankara. Thanks a lot.
We are defending our sovereignty from the same people who robbed our sovereignty from us in the first place. Nobody else. In December 1884 to April, May 1885, they met in Berlin, in Germany. Representatives of the key European nations of the time, including representatives of the United States, which had just gained this independence in 1776, plus representatives of the Tsar in Russia. No African was present there. They met to take away our sovereignty, to take away the sovereignty of our motherland, Africa. We were one continent, one country. They divided our country, Africa, our motherland Africa, into Bantustans, which they started calling countries, and we have continued to call countries. In that way, they took away our sovereignty. We fought back. We won some partial victories to regain our sovereignty. Again, who were we fighting for our sovereignty? We were fighting the same people who took it away. They overthrew Nkrumah. Today they are coming back. The same people telling us they want to set up military bases, they want to set up military offices to defend our sovereignty. Really? Our sovereignty? Definitely not our sovereignty. They are advancing something else. The same interest that made them turn us into Bantustans is what they are trying to advance and defend. They are defending American interests. They are defending French interests. They are defending British interests. They have never been there, even in the fight against colonialism. They are not there in our fight against neocolonialism. Let's not allow ourselves to be deceived. What they are here to advance is their interest, economic interest, mainly to do with our minerals. They came here for minerals. They came here for wealth. They are still coming here to set up bases, to set up military offices, again for minerals. Wherever they have got mineral interests, they always take an army. They have defended their interests, they have advanced their interests with their armies. They are here again. And all the time, they find puppets to recruit from among our people. The slave hunters, many were Africans. They used to hunt their own fellow brothers and sisters for very few pieces of silver, sometimes just cloth. They have come again. They are putting puppets as presidents all over the Bantustan they have created in Africa. Puppets funded by the same mining corporations. And the African people are being made to vote for them. They are funding puppets here in South Africa. They are funding puppets in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Malawi, in Tanzania, in Uganda, in Kenya. They are creating even foundations to establish new leaders. They want to pick them from a very early age. They take the best brains of our young people under the leadership programs, the Mandela Foundation, to train leaders under the Open Society and so on. Again, to advance their interests. But these are the same people who are coming to protect, to defend our sovereignty from who? From the Chinese? From the Russians? Is that possible? Are we threatened by the Chinese in terms of national sovereignty? Are we threatened by the Russians from in terms of national sovereignty? Who are they protecting us from? And they don't go where there are no minerals. Their focus is where there are strategic minerals. Today their focus is on DRC, a country they have never given a peace, a Bantustan they have never given a peace. Since Leopold II set foot on that territory to take slaves, to take our ivory, to take our minerals, to take our timber, DRC has never known peace. Its sovereignty has been always and always threatened by the same people. The Belgians, the French, the Americans, and so on. Today, even the Israelis have joined. For what? Minerals. They don't care about the Congolese people. They are dying every day. With the arms the same people supply and manufacture. For how long? 500, 600 years. They have been doing the same thing to us. Are we going to let them continue to do so? It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Our morning must come. Wherever there is a crucifixion, there must be a resurrection. Our resurrection must come. When you go to sleep, there is time to rise. Our time to rise has come. We have inspiration. We have Chrissy Hani. We have Jos Lovo. We have Amilcar Cabral. We have Patrice Lumumba, we have Nkrumah, we have Thomas Sankara, and many others to look up to for inspiration, for courage, for determination, and for the light to see where we are going. Thank you very much.